Welcome guys to this yet another amazing session where we are going to learn the index match function. We have already learned the match function as well as the index function individually in two other videos before this particular session. We have already known that the match function helps us find the location, or you could say the row number or the column number where a particular value is present. The combination of the row and column, or you could say the intersection of the row and column pointing to a particular column itself or a row itself, fetches the value by the index function. So we are going to use both these functions together, and we are going to learn a way in which both of these functions are going to be used together in one single formula as well. So for now, we are going to learn them individually so that you understand what is actually going on. The combination of index and match function is considered as a much powerful function, or you could say a much useful function than even the Vlookup functions. Let's understand where and how the match index function or the index match function is useful. Let's look at this particular example. In this particular example, the column D represents different set of months which are put up in different rows. The different columns E, F, G, H and I represent different values over here, which are the specific sales figures for in combination with different products that are lined up in the row 1. In sense, Dell laptop sold in the month of January have the sales estimate figures of 5,760. So as an IBM notebook in the month of July has a sales figure of around 3,232. We will use the index and match function here to find the combination of both these values. On the left corner here, I have already mentioned certain combinations which can be used to find out in the example ahead. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so that you guys can see the formula a little in detail. As I mentioned earlier, both index match and the Vlookup functions are both lookup functions. That means both can be used to derive values from respective columns or rows and from respective sheets in any place that we want. And I have also mentioned that the index match function is considered as a much powerful function than the Vlookup function. First, we are going to try in this case using a Vlookup function to derive the value based on the conditions which are mentioned over here. That means I want to derive the formula in such a way that I get the value corresponding to the month March and of the product HP laptop, that is in this case a value 3,358. We are going to use the Vlookup formula in this case and try and get this value first, and then we'll try and understand how the index match function is much more useful as well as better than the Vlookup formula. Let's understand. I'm going to use this particular column to do the Vlookup formula in this case. The formula goes by equals to Vlookup, bracket open. I'm going to use the month of March in this case to locate, since my March is the first column, that is the months are in the first column, and I'm going to use the month March in this case as my reference point to identify the row number where the value corresponding to the month of March and for the laptop, HP laptop, can be located. In this case, so I'm going to select the entire data set over here. Before selecting the entire data set, I'm going to select the month March in this case. I'll just do this once again, comma, and now I'm going to select the entire data set so that we can find the value in any column possible. Next, we want the value for HP laptop. HP laptop, as it suggests, is in column number 1, 2 and 3. We have to count the number of columns in the Vlookup formulas. If you have already done the Vlookup formulas, if you have not understood the Vlookup formulas, there are already videos put up for the Vlookup formulas in the previous sessions. I will bring up a link on this particular point itself so that you can follow up those videos and relearn the Vlookup formula here. So in this case, I'm going to look at March. I'm going to select the data set and I'm going to select column number 3 to get my particular value. and a comma and exact match to give me the value 3358 from the VLOOKUP formula. Now let's understand what the VLOOKUP formula is doing here. The VLOOKUP formula is looking for March in this particular column, and since we have mentioned properly to which column it should point, we have to understand that it looks for the third column starting from 1 to 3 being the reference point and fetches the value corresponding to March. So VLOOKUP formula in a general case is much easier to understand. However, over here we have just 5 columns. Most of the financial data of companies and incorporates, the data are quite huge. The columns, you might even get data sets with columns greater than 40, 50 or hundreds of columns. In such a case, it becomes a tedious task to go and count the column number corresponding to a particular data set. Also, selecting the entire data set for generation of a formula is also a hassle, because any particular change that happens to the data set will affect the formula not only in that cell but in also all the corresponding cells where the formula is linked up to. Let's try and understand what I mean to say. For example, what happens if I just cut my particular column D and paste it on the right side of the formula? Immediately you can see I'm going to get a not applicable error suggested by the formula itself. So this error arises due to the column reference that is used by the VLOOKUP formula. I'm going to go back to my previous display. So we have now understood that the VLOOKUP formula is useful only so long as the reference column or the column from where the data points to is kept stable in the data selection. Let's try and understand the match or the index match function and see how it is much more powerful in this case. We have been given the column HP laptop to be found amongst all the columns over here. So we are going to use the match function now to find out the location of the column HP laptop amongst all the columns over here on the top. In this case, we are going to use the match function as we did earlier on. We start with equals to match bracket open. I'm going to try and locate HP laptop in this case, comma, amongst all the columns that we already have known. So that is selection HP laptop in this case, comma, E1 to I1 in this case to select all the columns, comma, and it is asking me for the match type, so I have to go for 0 to show that we want to exactly match the contents. And there you go, we get HP laptop is located in column number 2. So you get the column number using the match function. How about finding the row number where the March month is located in the column D? So let's try and use the match function again. So I'm going to use the match function in this case, bracket open, and I'm going to select the month March, comma, and I'm going to look for March in this particular column, that is from the column D2 till D14 in this case, comma, and again a 0 for exact match, bracket close, and there you go. We have a combination of the row 3 and the column 2 in this case. All you got to do is use the index formula and we get a combination of all these formulas together and get a very different and an easy response to what we want. Let's try and use the index formula in this case. We are using equals to index bracket open, and I'm going to select the data set now. As I have already told you in the previous session where we learned the index formula individually, the index formula doesn't require for us to use the reference column or the top, you could say the row which points to the headers, to be included in the data set that we want to use. We can use simply the entire data set, or we can simply go and select the column number if we already know in which column we want to locate the same. In this case, I am using the entire data set so that we can use the intersection of the rows and columns much more efficiently. A comma to understand a row number, that is 3, comma, and 2 for the column number. In this case, close your brackets and there you go. Similarly, we'll try and use the combination of the index match function in the example below, but this time I'm not going to use two separate formulas like the match formula which we've done to find out column number and the row number. In this case, we are going to try and create just one single formula and do it all together at the same time. So let's try that out. The formula goes by equals to index, bracket open. I'm going to find the index of this particular data set. That means we want to find out the intersection of IBM notebooks and for the month of July. So we are going to get a value of 3232, and in this case, so I'm going to point to that, comma, in this case it's asking me for the row number, so I'm going to use the match formula wherever it's going to ask me for the row number. So I'm going to use the match formula here, match. I'm going to find what? I'm going to find the month of July, comma, in our subsequent columns over here, comma, and do an exact match in this case, bracket close, and again a comma, and it points to the column number now. So I'm going to match formula again, and in this case I'm going to use the IBM notebook, comma, I'm going to search for the IBM notebook amongst all the columns on the top, comma, and again a 0 for exact match, closing the bracket for the two match functions. So one more bracket we need to close for the index function, and there you go, we get the answer 3232 as required over here. So let's try and see how the index match function is much better than what we have mentioned earlier in terms of the Vlookup function. Let's try and cut this particular column D from this location, and I'm going to paste this column on the right side of the particular data set. You can see the Vlookup formula in this case gives me a not applicable error for the change in reference. However, you can see that the index match function doesn't give me any particular error, and we get the value that we have desired. So the index match function doesn't point to a reference column in a unique way as that a Vlookup formula does. The data set can point to any column towards the left of a particular data or a right of a particular data, and the index match function works as efficiently as any other formula. So we'll be understanding using the Vlookup and the match index formula also together in different cases in the assignments ahead. However, in this case, we have just realized the importance of the index and match formula and how it overpowers the Vlookup formula. I'm going to go back to my previous data set. I'm going to go to the right side of my screen. I'm going to scroll to the right side of my screen to look at another example of the index match function and how it can be used more effectively with respect to different columns. Let's see, in this particular example, I have 3 columns with name of particular people, the department of particular company they belong to, and their social security numbers in the column O. In the right side, I have another set of columns where I have selected certain set of social security numbers, and I want to use the index match function in this case to find out what particular row or column they belong to and fetch the particular value of the name belonging to this social security number. So in this case, if we had to use a Vlookup formula, so we would have had to replace this column position from the column at the end of this data set to the first column of the data set, so that it would be able to find this particular social security number. However, using the index match function, we can use this particular feature without any hassle. See the formula quickly. I'm going to start with the index function, bracket open. As I've earlier mentioned, that we need to directly find the array. Either I can select the entire column, in this case all the 3 columns or all the 2 columns, to select the array point, or in this case we are going to try a different method. Since I want to just find out the location of the name, or you could say the name, I can just go and select the name column over here. rather than selecting the entire data set, I'm going to try and use just the name column in this case, a comma. It is asking me for the row number now. We already know the column number is the name, so I've just selected the name column in this case, comma, and for the row number I'm going to use the match function in this case, the match function, bracket open, and I'm going to look for this particular value, and I'm going to look for this value in this particular row. So I'm going to use the entire row in this case. You can go and select the individual value from the O cell, but in this case I'm using the entire row itself, comma, and a 0 for exact match. There you go, we have matched out the row number, comma, and now it is asking me for the column number what it should intersect the row number that it has matched. Since we have selected only one single column, that is the column name, I'm going to type 0 for column number. That shows that there is only one single column that we need to point to, and since there are no more columns than one column, I'm going to use the value 0 in this case, close my bracket and hit enter. So there you go, it has fetched the value Watson Thomas. In this case I'm going to drag this formula down and I will get the values of all the particular names corresponding to the social security numbers. So try this formula out, guys. It is a much more interesting formula. Remember to put up any feedbacks if you have, or ask any queries in the comment section below. Also, you may ask me any other examples of any other data sets that you may have with respect to the use of index match function, and I'll be very glad to help you out with the same. Don't forget to like and subscribe this particular video. Do leave your feedbacks if you have any, and at the same time don't forget to press the bell icon. Stay home, stay safe. Ciao.